When we broke up, people were asking me about customizations and migrating and that. I'll maybe try to throw some of that in before we finish. So that's Azure Boards. Everybody kind of get what Azure Boards is for and does, right? It's our project management, agile planning, whatever you need it to be. I've worked with lots of different companies who are, very strict Scrum or Kanban or Lean teams. They use those tools. They work fantastic with those tools. I've worked with lots of companies who are trying to be agile but are still very waterfall, or just plain project management waterfall, and they also use those tools. They're very easily configured and changed, and can fit into a lot of different scenarios and processes. So, and for those of you that are less familiar, when you create a project, let me just show you really quick. When I go back out to my organization and I say create a new project, one of the things that I pick is which process template do I want. So do I want to be Agile or CMMI or Scrum? And if we go over to the organization settings a minute, under process, you'll see, we'll shrink up the other extra ones. So these are the three process templates that come with Azure DevOps. So you can do, so Scrum is Scrum, right? It is a process template built for a Scrum team. The Agile template is kind of a generic Agile. It is different than Scrum because it isn't, the workflow isn't committed, and they're not called product backlog items. They're called user stories, and there are, there's not a ton of differences, but there's just enough that it is slightly different. So the Agile one is very popular because if you're not a Scrum team but you are trying to be Agile, it works. CMMI, I don't think I've seen anybody use CMMI in a very long time. It's a little heavier. It has things in it like a change request and a review for putting meetings. It actually has a work item called a review where you can put in all the attendees onto a page, and so it's a little bit heavier. But the really cool thing about this is you can take that Agile template and inherit from it, and then you can customize. So I can come into my Agile template and I can add a new work item type, or I can customize one of the work item types that I've got in here by adding a new field, for example. If I want to track which product we're working in, then I can say new field, and I can call it product, and I can make that a drop-down list or a pick list of strings and enter in the values that are all the products we work on. And that'll be added to my story. And once I've added it, I'm adding it to a main repository, so I can then, without redefining it, add it to my bug, or add it to my epic or my feature. Yeah.
If I want to use waterfall, I pick CMMI?
No, don't use that as a blanket rule. Look into all of them.
Waterfall is still used by the organization requiring certification or regulation with the government, or like if you have a big project with hardware and stuff and software, you still use waterfall, or kind of hybrid between waterfall and agile.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. Even if I got regulations to follow, I can still be agile. They can still have governance in them. Governance doesn't go away because you're agile, but that's a whole different issue. We can argue that another time. No, CMMI isn't waterfall. It isn't a waterfall template. It's the big thing. Without getting too detailed, if you look, this is the agile template, and see it's got an epic and a feature. So an epic is like a project. A feature is a feature. It's a business level requirement. A user story is like it's the team's requirement, right? It's a technical requirement. And then the task is an individual task assigned to a person. Well, if you look at CMMI, it still has an epic, it still has a feature. Instead of a user story, it's called a requirement. It has a task, but it also has a risk, a review, an issue, and a change request. So it's got a little extra, if you want to do risk assessments, there's a risk, you can do that. If you want to have reviews, code reviews, design reviews, a meeting of any kind, then that's what that tracks. And then a change request lets you say, well, this requirement is going to change, so instead of change, like in Agile, we don't do that, right? If a requirement changes, change the requirement if nobody started working on it. If it doesn't hit the backlog, or it doesn't hit a sprint, change it. I don't care. If it has hit a sprint, you can't touch it, so therefore if it's changing, you better add a new story to make that change. Whereas CMMI still has the concept of a change request on a requirement. So I wouldn't necessarily call it waterfall, but it's closer. And there's a lot more. That was you know, a super fast review of what they are. So don't take that as, you know, there's a lot more in them than that. But the idea is you inherit from one of them, and that way, as Microsoft makes changes to these, you pick up those changes because you've inherited from it. So it's not like the old days where you made a change to your TFS process template and you created a new project with it, and now you're abandoned, you're stuck in that, like that's yours forever now, because you can't pick up the new ones. In Azure DevOps, you can. You just inherit from it, you do whatever. If you migrate from TFS up to here, there will be a fourth one that is named after your project, and it'll be whatever customizations you put into it. Okay? So let's take a look at, so that's our boards. Let's take a look at pipelines, and I'm going to finish up and show you a little bit about dashboards in a minute, or towards the end. So, so this is Azure Pipelines. It has several tools in it. We've got builds, releases, a library, task groups, deployment groups, and then XAML is just because this was migrated from an old XAML one, so if you were working in a new project, you wouldn't have that. Okay, you wouldn't need that. So here's what the build looks like. Everybody knows what I'm talking about with the build, right? This is an automated build server. So I'm going to switch to my Northwind database. Go to the builds in here. And so let me just show you really quick what a build looks like now. I've showed you guys builds before. I think I did a whole session one time a few years ago on build and release, just after Visual Studio Online came out, I believe, right? You're nodding, so you were there, so you must remember that. It's changed a whole bunch since then. So, you know, I'm building a new pipeline, and right away it's going, where's my code? Is it in GitHub or is it in Azure repos? And what it's going to do, if I carry on, you know, picking this and walking through this wizard, it's going to create a YAML build, which is going to be a build that contains a YAML script. And I'll show you an example of one, but I want to show you, I want to use the Visual Designer. So you'll see right here, I've got a link that says, use Visual Designer to create your pipeline. So I can make a YAML build. Like I said, I promise I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But here is using the designer to do it, and me creating and pulling in those tasks from the marketplace and the ones that are built in. So first things first, I pick my Git or my repository. So it could be my Azure repo Git. So the Git in Azure DevOps. It could be TFVC, it could be GitHub, GitHub Enterprise, Subversion, Bitbucket, or an external Git server. I'm going to pick TFVC in this case. I'll just pick my project, which is my Northwind database, and continue. So, and then the next thing it says is, okay, well, what are you building? And here's all my templates. So these are just templates for things. So when I pick one of these, it's going to pick a bunch of tasks for me and create it. And you see, I just got a whole bunch of things in here. There's Jenkins call. I can call out to Jenkins. So if I still have a Jenkins server and it does a lot of my stuff, but I want to start using this, or I want this to be the controller, it can call out to a Jenkins task and run that for me if I still want to do that. I'm going to just start with an empty one, so that we have a kind of a blank area to play with, and I'll show you a real one in a minute. So first, I've got my pipeline. So I'm in Azure DevOps. I don't have an office. This is my my account. I shouldn't say I don't have an office. I don't have a build server in my office is what I don't have. So I'm using hosted agents. So the build and release can run off of either your own on-prem, which I actually recommend. I have a preference for having my own build server or agents for build and release, because when I'm trying to debug the build and release or create them and I'm trying to do things with different technologies, I've got control over that machine. I can remote into it. I can see what's happening. I can install stuff on it. I can do whatever I like. But if you're doing, fairly blanket stuff, and that, when I say that, I don't mean .NET. If you're doing stuff that's sort of in the built-in world here, you can use a hosted agent. They're really cheap. They're running in the cloud. You don't have the infrastructure to worry about and take care of. You can see here's different hosted agents I can pick from. I can pick from Linux or Ubuntu or a Mac OS. I can pick a hosted agent with Visual Studio 2017 or a hosted Windows container. And these are all just hosted in Azure for me. Now, like I said, I get this for free when I have a public project. So if I have an open source Azure DevOps project, this stuff is mine to use, including the use of the build agents. I forget how many hours you get. You get a lot. They keep changing it, so it's hard to keep up with. But if I do pick a hosted agent, I will pay for that, using that machine, but I get something like do you know what it is, Laurie, off the top of your head? 180 or 108? It's like 100 and something hours a month or something. It's a lot. I know lots of people that use hosted agents and never pay a penny because they never go over the cap. Matter of fact, I'm one of them. I do demos all the time. I'm building stuff and releasing it to Azure, and I've yet to ever get a bill for using maybe if I did a whole bunch of talks in a week. But
when do you start being charged? Once you build the solution or running it? Or?
No, when it's building. You're paying for CPU time of that machine. But you're going to get your first so many hours free, so you're not going to get billed until you've used up that free time as well. So, okay, so I'm going to just pick hosted here. I already did this, there's my source. I can do things like label my source code with the build number. There's my build number down the bottom, a little variable that pulls my build number out. By the way, in the builds and releases, there are all these variables that you can use that are things to do with the system. I can show you when we get to variables in a minute, but there's just tons of them. Getting to know those is a really good idea. And then here I got an agent job, and you notice I can add multiple agent jobs. So and each agent job can go to a different agent if I want it to. And I can have my agent job, I could have one for testing, so I could say this is my build, there's my build job, and then I could add in another one and say here's where I run my unit tests. So now they're very separate pieces, and I can actually point them at different machines. You'll see the agent pool that they go from right now is inherited from the pipeline, which is hosted. But if I don't want to inherit from the pipeline and I need a different machine to run it, then I can go pick a different queue altogether. Because you can set up, on your build agents, you can set up, your builds can have demands and your agents can have capabilities. So I might have a Mac build server installed, and all my iOS projects need to build on that. So I would make sure that in my build of my Mac stuff, it has a demand that says this needs iOS. And only one of my build servers has that capability. So that build will always go to that machine. Or you can do the same with Java or with whatever it happens to be. So if you need to install something special, you can do that. I won't do all that right now. I have those multiple. I'll just keep everything in one. But then on my I might run on agent section. I got this little plus sign, and here's where I can get all my tools. So these are all the things that are included in the product that I can build. And you can see here, there's just tons and tons of stuff. I mean, it does, there's Ant, there's Android, there's iOS, there's Docker, there's .NET Core, there's .NET, there's ASP.NET. All of these tasks that are in here, so the all at the top means this is all of them, of course. And then here are the ones that are categorized as build tasks. These are the ones that are utilities. These are testing tasks. These are packaging. These are deployment. And these are tools. And this is the marketplace. So even if you go searching, watch, this is kind of fun. If I go, let's say I'm doing some AX stuff. So I just type AX up there, and it'll show me all the stuff that has AX in it. And it actually showed me these aren't installed. They're in the marketplace. But I can still see them right in my build. So I can just go in here and say get. And if I'm an administrator and have the rights, it'll add it it'll automatically add it to my account, and it'll just show up and I can use it. Worst scenario is I'm a user and I don't have those rights, so the person that does have those rights will get an email that says, Dave's asking for the Microsoft Dynamics AS build tools, and then that person is the one that has to add them to Azure DevOps for me. So there's some control there.
Is anything for blockchain?
Blockchain. Don't see anything. There's build chain. Tasks that help your team trigger and wait. No. No. Do you really need something for blockchain?
Yeah.
Oh, do you? Okay. So, tons and tons of stuff in here. I don't know if you got, just kind of scan your eyes over some of this. App Center Distribute, App Center Test, Hockey app is in here, Azure Key Vault, it's just Bash, a batch script. That's the thing I said before. If there isn't a task specific to the technology you're doing, by the way, it's really easy to write your own and publish it. I've written about 18 of them. I haven't published any of them to the marketplace because I'm too lazy to support them, or I don't have time to support them. I'm honest, come on. Because if I put them there, people would find issues with them, and I'd get emails, and I wouldn't want to go look at it. And terrible, isn't it? But if I made it an open source, what I should do is put them all in an open source project and let other people worry about it. That's what I should do. Maybe that'll be my first open source project. But usually I write them because I'm out of customers and I need something to do, whatever, and I would rather have it as a task item than just. But if I don't want to, I could, they're all just PowerShell scripts for the most part, right? And so, if I want, I can just come and grab the PowerShell task, and this will run a PowerShell script for me. Whether I pull it down from source control or however I get it, I can run other utilities that make life easy for me, running a batch script, doing command line. There's copy files. If I need to copy files over a network, I can. There's under deploy. There's a WinRM copy files, Windows machine files copy that takes the credentials, so it'll do it over WinRM. There's no agent required when I'm deploying. We'll talk about that in the release, but in these cases, you don't even need an agent sitting on the. Remember the old days with Release Manager? You had to have a deployment agent installed on the machine. For all these things, you don't need one. It'll just use WinRM to do it. No deployment agent necessary. If you want to have one, you can. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let's take a look at a build. Let's look at a real one. So this is my Northwind database. So this is building, here's all the tasks to build a database. So it's actually a database and database tests. So it's two projects in one solution. And so in the test solution, I'm setting the assembly info file to have the build number. So I want to take whatever I set as the build number and I want to dump it right into the assembly info so that when I build this, my build artifact has it stamped on the DLL. And then I set the version of the DAG, I build the solution, and then I create two artifacts, and that's what this publish artifacts does. So the two publish artifacts, one of them publishes a database schema, the other one publishes the tests that I can run once I've deployed that database. So, and in here I've got variables, so you see there's my major and minor. So that's how I set the version number for this. So let's increment that. Let's make it 2.4. So we just made a change. So I want to increment my version number to 2.4. I can set up the triggers. So here's a cool thing if you're used to the old TFS way of doing builds in XAML. You used to have to create a build definition for every different trigger, right? If I had a CI build, I had one build definition. If I had a gated check-in, it was a different build definition. If I had a scheduled one, it was another build definition. But now, what you do is just create one build definition and you say, I want this to be continuous integration. Oh, and I'd also like it to run every Wednesday night at 3 a.m. And I'd like it to be gated. And you just plug it all into the one build definition, nice and easy. You can also set up, I'm going to get rid of this. Oh, I'm famous for leaving stuff behind in a demo that I didn't want. Build completion, I can actually have, I can chain, here's your blockchain, I can chain builds. Is that good enough? So I can have one build trigger off of another build. So that one's done, now I need to trigger this one off.
I have a question about that. So like would that be separate pipelines then? So you could set up separate pipelines and have one pipeline as
Yep.
the complete trigger another one?
Yep.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Could you have it?
Did you get a T-shirt?
I'll go in later.
See, that was genuine, wasn't it?
Yeah. Can you also have it like trigger like multiple? So you could have like, say you have it build, then run tests, and then after the tests are completed, like trigger off like the, two separate ones in parallel, like on different hosts, so you can have like multiple things happening at once.
Yeah. So see, I can set up a whole bunch. So each of these can trigger different. I've only got one other build, but right. So yeah. So I can have it trigger multiple things. So a common scenario that I'll help somebody set up is, first let's get the build going. And it's funny because you get into places where they're not used to using automated builds, and it's amazing that their app won't even build. Like it builds on the machine that the one developer has, and they all go, well, Peter does the builds. And there's a reason for that, because that thing won't build anywhere but on Peter's machine. It's not that Peter is special or only knows something, it's that his machine is the only one, and nobody can remember why that is. So getting on a build server frees you from that completely, right? You will be forced, because if somebody says, well, how long will it take to set up a build? Okay, well, if you've got just a fairly basic app of a technology that I'm familiar with, I don't know every technology in here. I can do it, but I might have to do a little research. But if it's a basic .NET app and I'm gonna do, I can set you up a build in an hour, no problem. I could have it probably building and deploying to a machine in an hour and a half. But I never promise that, because inevitably I get there and the machine, the app won't build. So I gotta first get through the whole scenario of, okay, well, why won't it build, guys? What do we, and then they're all running around trying to make it happen. But you get that build to work. So the build runs, creates an artifact, and that artifact should be a environment agnostic package. So this is a package that's ready for deployment, but to any environment you want. In other words, there are no connection strings to the dev database. There are no connection strings to the dev services or whatever, right? All of those, the server that it's got to point to is a token, right? We've replaced that with it. I can show you what that means in a minute. We can look at some. Then that artifact is, you create a release, and that artifact is picked up by the release and deployed, and that's where I can run my integration tests or Selenium tests, or once I've deployed it, or database tests. So all my unit tests are run on the build, and all my other tests are run on the release. And the release should be set up to deploy to an environment and execute tests. And that's what we're going to do with this. That make sense? Yeah.
What about accessibility?
Of what?
Like people who, that are...
To create these, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's a group. There's a build administrators group, and there's a release administrators group in Azure DevOps. So if you put people in those groups, then they pretty much have rights to do whatever to the builds. They're kind of the build people. If you want everybody to have it, that's fine. I'm a fan of that, actually. You have a complete history. Like if you came in and changed something and screwed up my build, I know about it. Because as soon as you hit save, it's going to put a little version in here with your name, and I can see that I can go and look at the diff between the two. Where's my diff? Did they hide? Oh, is it? Yep, compare difference. Thank you very much. So there's the difference between those two builds. I'm one of those. I'm an open dev lead, right? When I want to empower everybody. I want my agile team to be self-governing and autonomous and be able to do everything. They should all be able to do everything. But I do understand there are times when people want to kind of lock down something. So there are the security in here is absolutely amazing. If I go back to, so it's amazing but difficult. It really takes some getting used to. If you look here, so there's my security, and this is a very common kind of form. So this is permissions for Northwind database. So these are specific permissions for this build. I can add a person or a group into here, and then I can assign that they are allowed to. So I can make it so you can queue the build, but you can't edit it, or you can view it.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you can get very, very nitty-gritty on anything. So that if you right-click anywhere in Azure DevOps and you see the word security on a menu like that, you can go in there and take that thing and you can make it, you know, whatever for either a group or an individual very easily.
May I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So would the group be from like an AD group, or it would just be you?
Can be. So Active Directory is so when you're setting up Azure Active Directory or Azure AD, yeah. So you got me on Active Directory. Azure DevOps. What you want to do is, so generally you want to have Azure. You want to be in Azure and you want to set up Azure Active Directory, and then you can, and if you sync your Active Directory to Azure Active Directory, then you can use Azure Active Directory within Azure DevOps very easily. So when you come in and set up, so if I go to project settings, for example, and go to security, so this is sort of the project level security. So every team that we set up, remember I have my Toronto team and my London team? So each team has a set of members and permissions on the project itself. So those are sort of main level projects. Every team gets put into contributors, which gives you access to do sort of the common stuff. You can add work items, you can do, you know, things, all the sort of normal things that you would want to do without going into too much detail. But then there's a build administrators group, and there's a project administrators group, or sorry, release administrators group. So if you put contributors or a team or whatever into those, then you can give them the rights to do that. And you can put individuals or you can put Active Directory groups. I got on a tangent and forgot to answer your question. But when you so see, when you go into teams, so I only have one team in here, but you know, I can go into this team, and this team can have its own administrator, and that means that person can add people to that team. And that team can have rights to different things in different areas. Let's go back to our pipelines a minute, because we're never going to get to the... I can always do hours if I need to. Okay, so let's run this build. Let's run the build and see how it goes. So I'm going to queue up a build. So here's my one to build. Let's go in and take a look. So it's looking for a build agent right now. And then it's going to go off, and once it finds a build, because I'm doing it in the cloud, right? So once it goes off, once it finds a build agent, it will connect to it, and it'll kick off the build, and we'll start to see stuff happening. There we go. So here's my log. So I can see each section happening. I can see the console of what's happening. All this is saved here, so I can always come back and look at my console session. I can also, it'll be zipped up and attached to the server and to the build, so I can go look at the logs as a zip file at the end. So right now it's getting my source slowly. I'm not sure why. Usually it's quicker than that.
Because it's on the cloud.
No, it's always cloud, this demo. I'll blame it on Wi-Fi. Library Wi-Fi. No, it's pretty quick. Your own build server is the nice thing about your own build server is it doesn't have to go get one. It's there, it's dedicated. The cloud one, usually that first step, that initialize agent, is the longest. It feels like the longest part because you're waiting for it to find one, but as it gets going, it's good. So now it's building the Northwinds database, and then it's going to publish a couple of artifacts. Come on, you can finish. Here's my last set of builds. You can see these are all old builds, how long they took. They're all green, so they all passed. So I guess we could expect this one to take about the same time as that. I'm just being impatient because you're all watching me. So while we're waiting for it, we'll come back to it and take a look at it. So I actually have set up this build as continuous integration. So if I had checked in a change, which I didn't want to go too far down the road here for time, but if I checked in a change, it would have kicked off a build automatically. This build is set up, if we go look at my release, so releases look very much like builds in that they have the same tasks. So that list of tasks and all the things that I can put in is the same. But a release has, so first of all what it does is it grabs artifacts and it deploys them into environments. And if we go and look at, well actually let's look here. So if I look right here, So this one is a continuous deployment trigger. So this is good. While we're looking at it, we'll let it trigger it. And then hopefully we can watch what happens. So this is my artifact. So what it's doing, I've got an artifact called Northwind Database. I can add more artifacts, by the way. I can have a separate build for every app I have in my portfolio, and I can have one release that releases them all. Or vice versa. I could build them all at once and have 50 releases. You'll notice here I've got my releases. So I've got my dev, QA, production. On these, at the beginning of these, I can decide when it goes to dev and when it goes to QA. So this is dev is after release. QA, you can see triggers after the dev stage has been deployed. And if I looked at prod, it would be the same. So if I set this to after release, see? The graphic always shows me when things are going to happen. So as soon as the artifact is created, it'll go to dev and QA at the same time.
So is every release a new version?
Nope. One build. So this is the beautiful thing about the whole ordeal is on my build. See if that finished. Looks like it finished. So here's my build. There's my artifacts that I created. The pipeline succeeded. It was manually queued. Any change sets and stuff are associated to it. I didn't do any of that. So here's my artifacts. So there's my Northwind database, and there's my unit tests for it. If we go into there, I can actually see those. So here's my, watch, if I download the Northwind test DLL, I really didn't mean to do that. That was, but yeah, I know. Let's do that again. You save that. I meant to do that. So if we, look, if I have a look at this guy and go to the properties, go to the details, see my build number right on the DLL there, 2.3.18325. Obviously I didn't save it when I set it to 2.4, did I? So that's my build number stamped right on there. So now I've created an artifact. Now from the release side, I'm going to deploy that artifact into dev. Let's go back over here. So that's actually should already be running because it is set to trigger on artifact creation. All right. Does the Wi-Fi? Oh, there we go. So see, here's my 18.325.1. That's my build. It's been deployed to dev, so it's already there. We can go look at that and see the release, and it's pending approval in QA. So there are approvals. There are pre and post approvals on every environment that you can turn on and off. So I have none on dev because I'm assuming if I kicked off a build, I want it to go to dev, or I wouldn't have bothered kicking off a build. It's not a CI build. This is just, I made a change. I'm trying to do continuous delivery, so go to dev. I have unit tests on dev. I'm going to run those. If they pass, I'm happy with it. So QA is the first place that gets asked anything. So QA will get an email that says, hey, there's a build waiting for you. And they'll get actually, we'll see if we can open it. So they'll get a link to the build. Here we go. Approval pending. So here's my deployment to QA is waiting for my approval. This will list all the other approvers. It'll tell me the change sets that were checked in on this build, the work items that were checked in on this build. I can just click on view approval, and that'll take me over to, so here it is. So you can see it succeeded here on dev. It's pending approval on QA. So I can approve it. I can decide if I wanted to deploy tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock or tonight at midnight, or I can just deploy it right now, or I can reject it. I can say, no, we're waiting for this particular bug to be fixed and it's not in this build. So I'm going to reject this one and I'll get the next one. Meanwhile, I can go back and I can click through and look at this build and see exactly what's in it. If I approve it, they've done a nice job on the UI here too, watch. So that's been approved. So see, it's queued up here. So watch the little QA tile. In progress. And it'll find out how many steps there are. I forget how many steps there are there's 3. So it's doing task 2 of 3. Oh no, it's found 7. That's funny that it started at 3. So it's downloading the artifact, deploying to Northwind, blah blah. So it's just tracking me through it. If I click on click on it, I can actually watch the logs, just like I can on the build. But if I don't, if my builds and releases run clean and good, and I don't normally have to sit and watch them. Usually I watch them when I first create them so I can, while I'm debugging them. So like I said, so this is an Azure deployment. I'm taking a database and deploying it to a SQL Azure database. If I was deploying a website, I can do it through WinRM. So I can just, have my website, I can connect to it as long as I've got credentials that can connect to that, and it'll deploy to it. If I don't want, I can set up deployment groups. See over here on the right, there's deployment groups. So deployment groups allows me to actually put agents on machines, deployment agents on machines, and then they show up as deployment groups in Azure DevOps, and then I can deploy to them without using WinRM, using special tasks that will talk to those. I mentioned I had, I'm going really faster because we're running out of time. So I mentioned I had credentials that for that WinRM, right, for that machine. I've got service accounts that can connect to it, and I don't want everybody to know those. So I can go into a library and I can set up variable groups. So here are my Azure credentials, everyone. I'll zoom in on it for you, hold on. So these are my Azure credentials. They're real. This is deploying to Azure. So I can set up a variable group, and I can put in multiple variables, and I can put in values, and I can secure those values. I can lock them so nobody can see them. And that is a one-way encryption, so no, you can't, even if you have rights to, you're a build administrator and you can come in here and you can, go like this and you can click unlock. It's not going to show them to you. You're screwed now. You have to come and get me because you don't know what it is to put it back, right? So you got to get out of here without. So it's all very safe. Or you can use Azure Vault as well and store your credentials in there and bring them in. You can also, the other piece in here that I'll just touch on is task groups. So I can take a bunch of tasks. So watch my release. So go into my release, and if I go, oops, go to my pipeline. Oh, I don't want the release, I want the release definition, sorry. There we go. So I'm going to go into here. So let's say I always do these three things every time I deploy a database. It's exactly what I do. And when I look at them, the variables I pass in are mostly system variables. There's a couple of places where I've got something like the server name and the database name. The user ID and password are coming from my library. But I could take these three things. Whoa, come in. And I can right-click on them and say create a task group. And it'll take those three and put them into a little group. That's the three of them, and expose any of the variables as a parameter. And then when I click on here, that thing will show up right here as a task. And I can add it into any release, and all the parameters it shows me are the variables that I had put into it. So it's almost like customizing your own tool by grouping a bunch of other tools together. Yeah?
If you make a change to one of those, does it work its way back into all the places you've already run that?
You bet. That's the other nice thing. So I've got one customer who deploys web apps. Right? They've got two web apps that they deploy into a beta and a release candidate, and then Dev QA there's beta has a Dev and QA, and then release candidate has a Dev QA staging productions. And they're fairly complicated. They're multiple apps, and there's a lot of code, and there's a lot of stuff to do. There's databases and things. So the web app part, he kind of boiled it down to 5 tasks because he's got to stop the website and copy the file, start the website. He has to stop the app pool and start the app pool and thing. So he boiled all those down to only needing about 4 variables, and there are about 5 steps, and he made them into a task group. And now when he needs to deploy an app, and it doesn't matter which app he's deploying, he just goes in to here and picks his own deploy web app and adds it, and he says, here's the name of the website, here's the server it's going to, here's the database it connect to, and one other thing, I can't remember what the fourth, and it deploys. Nice, easy, and like you say, when he needs to tweak that or make a change to it, he goes into task groups, and he opens up his deploy web app. You can see I've done this before, and he can make a change to this and tweak it and save it, and he's just changed all of his releases all at once. I love it for things like, sometimes I got a PowerShell script that I like to run, or I've got inline PowerShell, and it's just a little thing that I need to do. And what I'll do is, over on the release or the build, wherever I'm using it, I will add in task. So I'll go into my utilities and I'll grab PowerShell, add it in, and in the PowerShell thing, you can, oh, I've got the wrong one. There's another one that you can grab that it doesn't have to be a script, it could be inline PowerShell, and I'll put it in, and then I'll take that one single thing and I'll make it a task group. And then it shows up in my thing. So now instead of having to write my own tool and publish it in to get it so everybody can share it, I just turned it into a task group and now everybody can share it. That make sense? That's a lot of stuff for quick. So here's my release. It never did I not? It's pending approval. Oh yeah, so it's been deployed to QA. The reason QA is blue is now it's pending the approval to go to production. So this is the other end. So now the idea is we would have gone into QA and we would have tested it. And so this is pending approval, so I'm going to say approve. And so that's succeeded because there's really nothing to do. This is the post-approval. And now we can go back and it should be pending production. So now it's waiting for somebody to accept it.
How good are error handling? If you have a build error, how far you can go to identify and fix the bug?
You have all the log. You get a console of everything that's happened. So if you're writing your own tools and your own scripts and that's up to you. You put your own error projection into it, right? You write out as much stuff as you want. But for every tool that I've ever used, it's great when you're looking at the logs. You are seeing. See, if I look at a particular release, I can jump into the release at whatever environment it was released to. Look at the logs, and I just pick one, and I see exactly what happened.
So if you have a compilation error, then you have to go to Visual Studio.
Yep.
It's not like clicking here and going directly there.
No, not quite that easy. That'd be nice.
Depending on,
Yeah.
can you manually deploy old build? So for example, the one you just pushed to QA, there's something horribly wrong with it, you want to go back so QA can continue working on an old build.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a great question. Yeah, for sure. So watch, if I go, so watch, I can create, so I'm on Northwind database, I'm just going to create a release. And right here, I can go back and pick from old builds. And yeah, so if something went crazy wrong with this one, and I want to back out of it, the easiest way sometimes to do that is just go grab the last build and redeploy it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, super easy. So you're in, like, I've got this all set up to be automated, right? I mean, it's a pipeline. It's set up to, I check in code, it builds it, it creates an artifact, it deploys the dev, it runs my tests. As long as the tests pass, dev will be okay, and QA will get an email that says there's a build ready for you. Done. I go back to, I'm already working on my next code change before that's happened or done, and I haven't had to touch anything. But at the same time, all of this can also be very manual if you want it to be. So you can create a release, and then you can say, you can go into that release and say, oh, I want to deploy this to this environment now, and you can just force it over into that environment. You're in complete control. One thing I didn't really tell you guys, we have 2 minutes according to Laurie. So variables are very important in the release. And so what you can see here is, if I go into my pipeline and look at my deploy Northwind database, there's a couple of things that I need to know. I need to know the server name and the database name and the server admin login and the password, right? So those are and anything in dollar brackets is a variable. And I set those up here as variables. But you notice they're duplicated 3 times. Matter of fact, if I go back here and say, well, you know what, let's clone QA and let's make a training environment. So every time we deploy to production, we also deploy to a training environment. And that guy has the exact same steps with the same variables. So you try to build your pipeline so that anything that's environment specific is a variable. Now I go up to here, and now see what happened? Now I've got a DB name for the training environment. And I just say, oh, well, that should point to training. Or maybe the training environment points to QA. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. So you can see, and I can flip my scope in here, so I can say, well, here, there's my dev environments, variables. So these things just become tokens in your config file. So database name is a token, server is a token, and the release manager will automatically, so that's what this step does, watch. This replace tokens task, it'll look through any config files found in the Northwind database working directory, and it will look through all your variables and replace the values as it's deploying. Everything should be hands off. I get so grumpy when I and somebody logs into the QA machine, or they say, or somebody will say, oh, the QA deployment failed. This Azure DevOps doesn't work, and then we find out they were in there messing around with stuff. Yeah.
Is there a way to save your environment variables, like as a group of variables? So like, so we have
Yep.
like 10 development environments, so it'd be handy to say that, and when we say we're deploying to dev one, it already has all those variables.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So variable groups, I wasn't clear on this before. I kind of talked to them as credentials, but variable groups don't have to be credentials. I can say, DB name, server. So this could be a set of variables, and then there's a way when you use it. Let me see if I can. So when you go into the variable section of variable groups, you can link to a variable group, and then you can say variable group scope, its release, or it can be for particular stages. So you can have, so you have the same 10 and that's common. I get the same 10 variables for every app that I always need, and I don't have to type them into every release I do. You can put them in a variable group and then just reuse that variable group at every release. Okay, I got to get out of here now because we're out of the. Really quickly. A whole bunch of great tools, better together because they're integrated and they work together very well, but totally not necessary. If you want to plug, if you want to use Ansible and Chef and Puppet and Jenkins and whatever else, you can do whatever you want. You can mix and match those tools with these tools together. So it's not kind of there's Microsoft and there's open source. They play together very, very, very nicely. I promise you a couple of numbers. So this is DevOps at Microsoft. Big numbers. 372,000 pull requests a month they're doing. 4.4 million builds, 5 million work items viewed, 2 million Git commits a month, 500 million test executions per day, 500,000 work items updated every day, and 78,000 deployments. I have one customer I was very happy about. They were doing 6,000 builds and over 2,000 releases last year. That's a lot. Like 2,000 releases that's over multiple apps, granted, and everything. But they are and that's on TFS 2017. They're not in Azure DevOps yet. But these numbers just make it's like 78,000. Holy, crazy. If you're curious about pricing for some of this stuff, as some of you might be, open source, free pipelines, all that stuff. So if you make it a public project, you get the world handed to you. Go for it. But it's a public project. Everybody can see it. Anybody can access it. Small teams. If you want to set up an Azure DevOps account for yourself, go for it. It's totally free. You can even bring 4 of your friends in with you. So 5 of you together can connect to this and use it. You get Azure Pipelines. You can set up your own build agent, or you can use hosted build agents. Azure Boards, repos, artifacts are all available to you. You wouldn't get the test tools, but all that other stuff is there. And if you want the works and it's an enterprise account, or this is for work or for the company, it's about $6 a person a month to you. Actually, your first 5 are free. So the first 5 people in the company get it for free, and then after that you pay $6 a month per person. It's pretty cheap. If you're on TFS and you want to migrate now, it's really easy and straightforward. We do it all the time. I've got cards if anybody is interested in knowing more about what we do and how we do that. I was telling somebody before, we'll take your old TFS, depending on how old it is and what stage it's at, you might have to go to various versions, so we do that for you. We'll move it up to 2018 and then move it into Azure DevOps and do a sample account, let you validate, look at it, play with it, try it out, make sure everything's there, all your history, all your work items, everything will be there. And then when you say, yeah, that's good, do the real thing, then we just take another backup of your collection and away it goes. Pretty straightforward. We've done so many of them, it's not funny. You can also do it yourself. Do some research and try it out. All the information is out there on the web to learn how to do it. Some people were asking for, are there videos? Is there help? There's tons. Laurie can, I'm sure, point you at way more than I can. But if you go to azure.com DevOps or DevOps Forum, there are loads of videos on each of the areas that you can go into and watch, and it'll kind of give you a little starting point and how to play around with it a bit and some setup. There's tons of information out there on the web.
Is this available in the latest Microsoft Learn environment, cloud-based learning
Yeah,
stuff?
I think there's videos there. Do you know for sure, Corey? Yeah, I don't know. I can't remember if I think so. Yes. I don't know how up to date they are yet. It always takes a little bit of time when something's released. Do me a favor if you get a chance. There's if you go to Azure DevOps Community, aka MS, there's a little survey about what you saw tonight. Feel free to fill it out and let me know how you liked it and if I can do anything better or worse or whatever you like. There's a couple of t-shirts left. Thanks very much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Our next session is December 12th. It's the lightning round session. And it's not Ari, it's Andy that's doing, so it's Andy, Dan, Samantha, Mary, George, and Callan are all giving, each are giving a 15-minute talk. So it's 6 sessions through the night, so you'll learn 6 new things. So I hope you guys all come out to that. Other than that, have a great night, and thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. Always fun.